Special session, balance governing body, to deal with an appeal. Please put your phones on silent or vibrate, however you want to do it, turn them off. And then once you've done that, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So Councilor Miera is somewhere in South America, we think. All right. Councilor Woolman is online.
Here.
Good. Councilor Knight.
Here.
Councilor Alsobrook.
Here.
Councilor Murray.
Here.
And Councilor Burkett, we believe, is not going to make it.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So everybody's here. So everybody but Zach. So this is new business, appeal filed by Maribel Marquez. I'm going to go through a script here for this quasi-judicial appeals process. The hearing today is a quasi-judicial hearing and the decision was made by members of the governing body. All but one are here. And I'd like to ask the appellants and the appellees to please identify themselves. Maribel Marquez. Okay. And Jason Lewis. Okay. And the appellees. Yes, sir.
Marvin Dawson.
Okay.
And my wife is online. She's at the University.
Oh, okay. Very good. Thank you. The scope of this appeal will be limited to whether or not the council should uphold the decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission to grant this short-term rental approval. If people go outside of that scope, I'll call them on it, say that's irrelevant, if in case it is. That goes for the parties as well as the councilors unless it's really related to the appeal. We're recording this meeting tonight so that a complete, clear record can be created of everything said. However, please remember that we cannot create an accurate record with people talking over one another or interrupting each other. So I'm going to be strict about people doing that. If people start to talk over each other or interrupting, I will stop them so we can be sure to get a clean record. The council will have the opportunity to ask questions. Council, if you have any questions, please make sure to say mayor so that I can make sure that you are identified, recognize you, and let you speak. Again, that's for the record, and so we can get those questions and answers down. Questions should be focused on clarifying the record or the arguments given and should not include new information or evidence being offered by a counselor through the question. I'm also going to assume that everyone's demeanor is going to be appropriate and there will not be any badgering or argumentation of the witnesses. I will call people on that. Hearing on the record, evidence of this hearing is made up of everything in the record from the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing. New evidence or testimony is not allowed unless it is allowed by the governing body to be introduced for the first time here tonight. The decision is on the record for the hearing, and if an exception is granted by the governing body for good cause, that new evidence will be entered. Evidence includes testimony and exhibits. If either party has exhibits to present that are not in the packet, please present them to Village Clerk Melanie Romero for distribution to the governing body or to display on the video screen after it has been determined admissible by the governing body. The general outline of how the hearing will run. First, we'll have a summary of the case by P&Z administrator, except she's late. We will hear we may change that a little bit. We will hear a presentation by the first appellant, Maribel Marquez, followed by a rebuttal from the appellees. Each party's time will be limited to 15 minutes. A party may request more time if the matter being heard is extremely complicated, and upon their request, if the governing body agrees. We will then move on to a presentation from the second appellant, Mr. Jason Lewis, followed by a rebuttal from the appellees. Again, each party will be allowed 15 minutes. The appellants and appellees may present argument or call witnesses if allowed by the governing body of any new witnesses, and they will be sworn in by the village clerk. The appellants and appellees can rely on the record of exhibits and witnesses from the P&Z Commission meeting where the short-term rental application was heard. If there are exhibits or visual arguments, those again should be given to Melanie, put on the screen, and you will need to explain what the exhibit is. Before making a final decision, counselors or I may have questions of the witnesses limited to clarifying the evidence, the parties' arguments, or the decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission. No independent evidence should be offered by counselors or myself, and I'll try to keep us reminded. Yes, sir.
Sir, Mayor, do we need approval of the agenda before we move forward?
This is it. And there's really just says new business. There is no agenda.
Okay, very good.
After questions, I'll close the hearing and the governing body will deliberate. Village council may make a determination in open session or decide to deliberate in closed session as allowed by the Open Meeting Act. All decisions must be made, however, in public. The governing body may grant the appeal and deny approval of the short-term rental application, or deny the appeal and uphold the approval of the application. Once a decision is made, then there will be a direction to our attorney to prepare a written decision and findings of fact and conclusions of law. Don't want to exclude that. Supporting the governing body's decision based on the facts established in the record. The hearing date for a vote on that decision will be as soon as practicable. After the approval of that final decision, the appeal will be concluded. Any questions?
Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
since this is a quasi-judicial meeting, I need to be transparent and say that after the first P and Z meeting, I did talk to Ms. Marquez and Mr. Lewis just about what to do next. But I feel as though I can be objective and have an open mind and listen to all the evidence
Okay.
for tonight's meeting.
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
Any other counselor have issue? Okay. Anybody else? Anyone? Okay. What have we heard from Lori?
Nothing more since the phone call.
Well, let's adjourn for a few minutes. Let's just turn it off for maybe 5 minutes.
Okay.
Maybe that'll put us at around 6:15.
Okay, I will pause the recording.
Okay. Okay, so Lori Stout, you get to start off. You want to identify yourself?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Council, Ron, I'm Laurie Stout. I'm the Planning and Zoning Administrator for the Village of Corrales. I actually didn't know I was going to start out because I was not present at the February meeting, but I did help the Dawsons with their application prior to and spoke with them afterwards, so I can probably answer questions about that, just not what may have occurred at the meeting itself.
Okay, so you don't want to read this memo?
I could. Can I borrow it? I literally just blew in
It's
from
in
the
the,
Sunport.
it's, huh?
I just flew in from the Sunport.
Literally. Go
Literally.
ahead.
So if I could borrow the memo, I'd be happy to read it.
So we don't need to put all that in the legal part.
Okay, thank you. These are the things that I can absolutely speak to. It's my memo.
Wait a second. You said you weren't at the meeting?
I was not at the February meeting, but I did do this memo
So you
based
need-
on the things that I can talk about that
So-
aren't hearsay.
According to that, you need to swear in.
Raise your right hand. Please state your name.
Laurie Stout,
Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
Okay.
Thank you. Like I said, I wasn't present at the February 19th meeting when this short-term rental application was heard. However, I spoke with Norman and Barbara Dawson when they were working on getting their site development, or I'm sorry, short-term rental application materials ready, and in early March after the meeting. I can address the following concerns. For the purpose of the Village Ordinance Section 1845F, which governs short-term rentals, Norman and Barbara Dawson are the applicants. How they choose to structure their business for licensing, state or federal tax purposes, such as an LLC, doing business as, et cetera, that is a separate matter. They are the applicants for village purposes. They have attested they live on site at 1247 West Ella Drive in Corrales and are both the property owners and the listed operators for this business, as shown on their application. Another thing I can speak to, I do know that at some point in time, our code enforcement officer believed the site of the short-term rental that was taking place was on an adjacent property, 1818 Loma Larga. I don't know how that came about. I think it had to do with perhaps either the host compliance software or it may send you to Airbnb. But she thought that was the address, and she did send that property owner first a courtesy notice followed by a notice of violation, asking that particular owner to contact her. I cannot speak to any conversations that she may or may not have had with the other owner, but the error was the villages and not the Dawsons. At some point, it became apparent that the rental property was in fact 1247 West Ella. And at that point, the Dawsons did submit a short-term rental permit application. Finally, just in terms of the application itself, as presented to Planning and Zoning Commission, it is compliant with Village Code Section 1845F. The applicants have requested the ability to rent 2 of the 3 bedrooms within their home to a maximum of 4 short-term rental applicants or occupants. The applicants will reside in the 3rd bedroom. It was approved by the Village of Corrales Planning and Zoning Commission by the unanimous vote of all 7 commissioners present during that February 19th, 2025 meeting.
Wait. Bill, do you have any questions?
I do not. Thank you.
Do you have a question?
Yes, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Lori, in the packet we have, there's a map that shows the rental, short-term rental property to be that 1818 Loma Larga. And I know you just said that that was the, at least I think you said that was a mistake from the village's point of view. In the in the letter from the appellate, it mentions that this was improperly marked on the Airbnb map, and that subsequently this misleading map location caused the village to issue violation notices to the homeowner of 1818. So which came first? Is the map from the Dawsons, or is the
Well,
map from
I
us?
believe, Counselor, this has actually happened one other time, and I don't know why that is. I'd like to personally delve into the host compliance software a little deeper and see why this happens. We, as the village, have access to rentals that are taking place here. And for some reason, our software believed it was 1818 Loma Larga versus the actual location. So at that point, our code enforcement officer sent that owner the notice.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Lori. Okay. So now we'll move on. So who is going to speak for the, Bill, are you going to speak for I guess yourself, yeah. Would you like to take the stand?
And if you could just state your name and address for the record, and
Yes.
we're going to give you 15 minutes.
My name is Bel Marcus, or Mighty Bel Marcus. I live at 1203 West Ella Drive. Good
And just
evening.
make sure you're speaking into the microphone. You can take it off the stand and hold it up to your mouth
that's
if you need to.
Okay,
And don't pay attention to that. That's just the timer.
yes. All right. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm here about the permit approval that was approved on February 19th, and I'd like to let you know that it's very unsettling about the occurrence, how this went about. The P&Z coordinator recommended approval prior to any comments being received from the public. In fact, 3 days prior to any comments being received to this meeting. So I feel like my due process of providing comments was not taken into consideration when this recommended approval was given to the P&Z Council. It was further exacerbated by the P&Z meeting when I attended via Zoom, is that none of my concerns that I had submitted were even addressed at that time. They got sidetracked with this map issue and everything. And when I tried to bring up the other issues, not one of my concerns that I brought up was addressed, which includes safety, increased risk of crime, lack of accountability, enforcement of number of rental rooms, short-term lodgers, potential decrease in property value, parking and traffic issues, loss of privacy, and then the application itself of how it was put together with the different entities being on that application as a mishmash application. So none of my concerns have been addressed at all. And so my question is, what constitutes a nuisance based on the application that is one of the things that needs to be addressed? And I feel like my concerns are that nuisance. What is a nuisance to the village if not any of these things that I have raised? The other is that I also question, the ability of the appellant to run a business. I mean, based on the application and its errors and omissions that were in there, I feel like they are not capable of running a proper business because there were 3 different names in that application. Which one is the proper applicant? There are 3 different names. As Ms. Stout stated that in her letter, in her memo, and this evening, is that how they choose to run their business is a separate matter. Well, it's not a separate matter. That's part of the application process that you go through and state who is the applicant, not 3 different applicants. How is that any different than asking, do you have a sewer permit? Do you have a fire inspection? You're asking for data about who the proper applicant is, and that has not been submitted. In fact, during the meeting, the P&Z meeting, that was raised, and I quote by Mary Chappelle, that she wanted to address, which you're requesting a permit granted in your individual names, or is it in the LLC name? And I quote Barb Dawson. So Bell brings up an interesting question. Is it balancing life and work? Is it purple merch? Purple mud. Is it Airbnb? I see it all as one thing. Well, it's not, again, this is part of the application process where these 3 different entities were listed. And Mary Chappelle, I quote, okay, but answer my question directly. It calls you individually as the applicant. Barb Dawson, oh man, that was her response. Also when asked during the P&Z meeting, other issues were brought up that weren't even my concerns, as far as are guns written into your ordinance or your rules. And that wasn't even brought up by anybody. That was brought up by the council people at the P&Z. And they were offered even advice as to how to write that into their Airbnb rules for that matter. And I feel it's not the village's part, or I think it puts liability on them to start offering advice on how people should write their Airbnb regulations. I just find it that it's just very, like I say, unsettling that, due process was not given to where comments received were not taken into consideration prior to approval. And I feel like this is not the first time an Airbnb or a short-term rental has been put before P&Z. And I'm sure this is not the first time concerns that I have raised have been brought forth. But yet there have been no answers or no responses. You can even have canned responses to half the concerns that I raised. And they haven't even provided anything like that. And in fact, during that P&Z meeting, there was another short-term rental prior to the one that with my adjacent neighbors that had submitted comments similar to mine about quality of life, that type of thing. And the P&Z members didn't even address it. So it's just not my comments that were not addressed. It's just, I know it happens. It seems like it's a common occurrence that when public submits comments that they're not taken into consideration. And I find that very disturbing and unsettling. Because I just don't feel like we're being heard as residents and trying to be good residents for Corrales to make sure that our quality of life is protected as well. So with that, I will yield whatever time, if I may, to Jason Lewis, Esquire, to take my time, but I'd like to conclude that I request that the commission rescind the permit and that no further action be taken with the short-term rental based on the information presented.
Okay. So, do the appellees have a rebuttal? Mr. Dawson, do you have a rebuttal? Blast off.
Randy, you sworn in or something?
You were at the meeting, weren't you? And it's your property. No, you don't need sworn in.
Mayor,
I think you just,
Yes, ma'am.
doesn't anybody who speaks need to be sworn in?
Not if they were there,
Oh, okay.
is my understanding.
That's
Thank
how
you.
we've done the last several appeals, is if they were at the meeting, they're still considered
If they're-
under oath from
if
when they were
there's
sworn in. before.
Anyone from outside are sworn in. He gets an extra 11 minutes or 11 seconds, I guess.
I did
Oh, you
pause.
stopped it,
Yeah.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Dawson, no, you don't have to be sworn in.
Okay,
You can go ahead and start.
great. Okay, my name is Norman Dawson, Mr. Chairman, the councilors and guests. I appreciate the ability of putting up the closed captioning. I have a hearing impairment. I have cochlear implants. I do read lips. I do hear some. But when you are speaking, please speak into the microphone so that I can see your face if I need to have clarification. I may ask for clarification because I may not understand what you're saying, so I have to ask for clarification. I'm a retired chiropractor and I own a business that my wife and I own together and have for the last 28 years, a very successful business. I want to apologize for the time and the taxpayer expense over this appeal process because this is something I think that could have been handled by neighbors talking to each other over the fence. My wife and I and our 4 children moved to Corrales from Albuquerque in 2007 because we love the ambience, the rural way of life, like a farmland. There was no sidewalks, no street lights, no traffic lights. It had the small town feel. We felt we were really safe to bring our kids here to this environment. It was just right for us. My response to Ms. Marquez is based on common sense rather than legalese, so I can just get to the basics here. First and foremost, I hear Ms. Marquez's concerns. My perception of her concerns are threefold: quality of life, safety in Corrales, and property values. Ms. Dowd has already addressed some of the issues, the ramifications of business and licenses and all that stuff, and I'm not even going to touch that. I'm just going to talk about these 3 things here. In 2007, we moved into Corrales, and that weekend it snowed 6 inches. Anybody remember that? You do, if you lived here then. And right off the bat, our neighbors across the street, Connie and Jamie Gondato, who are sitting in the audience here, brought over their snow shovels or shovels and helped us clean out the area in front of our house. I thought, wow, we struck it rich by finding the right neighborhood where people care about each other. That's great. A couple of years down the road, there was a neighbor 2 houses down who had a house built, and we watched the construction all along the way. Finally, when they got the house built, they moved in. What do? We took a plate of cookies. Welcome to the neighborhood. That's just the way we are. He's a retired plumber. And as time went on, we became good friends. Several times he came over to the house and, you know, being a plumber, I said, hey, how would I fix this? Or how much would you charge to do this? A couple of small things. He got in there right away and fixed them for us. Wow, we've got good neighbors. They had Super Bowl parties at their house every year, and they invited all the neighbors over, and we went over there many times. They were a really nice group of neighbors. One year, my wife was in the backyard working on the garden, And Phil Apodaca, who's in the audience here, he brought his two little puppies over, and our dog was talking to each other. And my wife said, I'm wondering if I should plow the area. Mr. Apodaca says, I've got a plow. I'll bring it over. He came over and plowed our garden. Wow, what neighbors we have. Talk about the quality of life that we were looking for. Sometime during this whole several years, I don't have the chronology correct here, but Miss Marquez and her now ex-husband came over to our property because my wife and I were pulling out the wooden stakes that were attached to the fence. And what did they do? They helped us out. Wow, nice neighbors. We love our neighbors. One day we had our rototiller out in the yard, in the garden. Barb was rototilling. And Miss Marquez came over and she said, hey, can we borrow your rototiller? We just need to do a rototiller, a little part over here. Well, sure. What are neighbors for? As a matter of fact, when you get finished with the rototiller, put it in the backyard. And when you need to use it again, help yourself, because we were neighbors, good neighbors. Shortly thereafter, or somewhere in that period of time, we had horses. Miss Marquez did not have access to the water from the acequia. She said, hey, would you guys be willing to let us dig a trench and put a pipe into your property so it can connect to ours? Of course, we're neighbors. Why wouldn't we want to do that? Now, the only thing we had to do, we had to put the horses into a separate area so they wouldn't fall and trip into the trench. But no big deal. I need to get my water.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to object to any continuation of this line of speaking, in that it goes against the rules that you gave at the outset of this meeting to speak to the issues which are related to the short-term rental application and issues related to those who were raised in the appeal. While I'm happy to listen to some history about what has gone on in the neighborhood for the past 15 years, I think we've now exceeded that, and this is in violation of the instructions that you gave at the beginning.
Well, it's very entertaining.
Yeah, I'm sure.
What you think about that was not an appropriate comment. Why don't you go ahead and move on with more about the short-term rental application?
I am not going to address the issue of the short-term rental part because Ms. Stout has already taken care of that. And I'm trying to address the issues that Ms. Marquez raised about quality of life, safety, and the property values. In order for me to do the quality of life, I need to review what the quality of life means to us. And for me to make that point is necessary for me to do that. So I object to the counselor's objection. So
Well, I really think you've made that point. I think it's okay. Go ahead and move ahead to the next point you want to make.
okay, the next point is so any guests that stay at our house, they have to meet the Airbnb vetting processes. In other words, if anybody knows about Airbnb, there's a process that the people who want to rent properties have to go through and answer some certain questions and make sure that they're qualified. And whenever a guest stay at our house, we want to make sure that they are qualified to like a 4.5 or higher. Now, all the guests must have that rating in order for us to vet them. We will vet them ourselves by asking appropriate questions and making sure that we find out why you're here, how'd you get here, what are you going to do when you're here. We want to make sure these people are people that will live in our house. They will be safe, not only for us, but also for the community. So we make sure that the guests are good ratings. As a matter of fact, the first two guests we had during the balloon festival, one of them came down from Denver, and she had worked for a IT company, and she was down here for a conference. And when she stayed here, we made sure that she qualified at a high rating of a 5.0, and she left, leaving us with a 5.0. And the other woman that was here, she had a similar arrangement. She worked for a movie industry. So Ms. Marquez seemed to be concerned about property values. Well, according to the data that I have, and these two guests that I just mentioned, they came in, they stayed here, and what did they do? They went to the Indigo Crow and Hannah and Nate's restaurant. They went to some of the shops. And they said, wow, this is the best food we've ever had. And the data that I have is that Airbnb guests increase the value of the properties because tourists want to come to this area here. And when they show up, they spend money and they increase the revenue, the tax dollars. Additionally, the data that I have says the host will spend money to increase the property value so that they can get more guests to come in. And that means that more revenues, higher fees and higher taxes will be collected. As far as the safety that I'm concerned about in Corrales is it's really New Year's Eve and 4th of July when people shoot their guns off in the air and what goes up must come down. That's my safety issue. I don't believe that I'm going to put somebody that's in my house that's not going to be safe, but I'm living with those people and I want to make sure that they're safe for the community as well. And lastly, Ms. Marquez, in her appeal, talked about dogs barking. My dog barks. I have coyotes coming into our yard. We have chickens. We want to make sure that the dogs protect us. Our dogs are going to bark. Dogs bark in Corrales. Cows moo. Coyotes howl. That's the life in Corrales. So that part of it, anyway, I tried to address the issues of quality of life, safety, property values. I just think it's too bad with all the chaos going on in the world. We have to resort to a legal process among neighbors instead of chatting over the fence. Now, I have a number of people here that I've invited that I would like to ask the chairman if it's okay if they make some comments.
Counsel, do you have any problem if he calls witnesses?
Not as long as if there's new testimony, we'll
Dig
need to
in.
vote on that, but otherwise.
I think a 3-minute limit on each person would be great.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
And after that, we can question Mr. Dawson then?
Yes.
Okay.
So can I get a motion to, how many witnesses are you talking about?
I have list here. You don't have to do them all, but I was told that I need to give you their names. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5 people for sure.
Well, I would say 3. We'll give them each 3 minutes. And they'll be sworn in, each one will be sworn in. Do you have any, do I have a motion from the council to do that? Is that okay?
So moved.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All right.
Okay, sorry, that was Waldman that moved and also
Yep.
Brooke seconded?
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 3 people identify themselves where they live and then they'll be sworn in.
I'm going to move over here.
Say again?
You want me to move out of the way here? So
You
they
move
come
out
up
of the
here?
way and they come up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you want the names or do you want me to?
Then
bring them up?
you can tell them who's to talk.
Okay, Connie Grandado, Muriel Apodaca, and Bert Cox.
Sorry, what was Connie's last name?
Grandado.
It's Irish.
Connie, if you'll raise your right hand, please. State your name.
Connie Grandado?
And is the testimony you're about to give the truth and the whole truth?
It is.
Okay, please proceed.
Hi, council?
Could you please identify yourself one more time and where you live?
Yes, my name is Connie Grandado. I live at 1248 West Ella, and the street numbers on our street, like every street in Corrales, are a little wonky. So just to give you proximity, I live directly across the street from Norm and Barb, and Belle lives catty corner to me. My daughter lives next door to me, and Mr. Lewis lives behind Belle. So I do not know Mr. Lewis, but I've lived in the village for 40 years. We've lived at our current address for 27 years. We are the first ones in this community right here on that corner. We lived there the longest. So Norm and Barb moved in 2007. We moved in 98. Belle moved in after our neighbor Charlie passed away, and he was almost 100. And they bought his house and remodeled his house. Mr. Lewis has moved in fairly recently compared to the rest of us. Norm and Barb have been fantastic neighbors. Belle has also been a great neighbor. And I'm not really sure what the conflict is about. We have more dogs than anybody else and they bark, but we live across the street. Norm and Barb raised 4 kids. We had 3, we had 7 kids on on the corner there. And that's more than they would ever have in an Airbnb. So
I don't think the issue is neighbors. The issue is whether or not they should have a short-term rental in the
Right.
Dawson's house.
And that's what I was saying. We had 7 kids on the corner and never had a problem. So a few people for short-term rentals is not going to add a burden to the proximity of where they have a very large front area to park. No one would ever have to park on the street. I can't imagine that it would be a problem. I mean, we've had a lot of association with Airbnbs in the years. Airbnb has places all over the world. If you've never stayed with them, they're an amazing company. They're very good about vetting their hosts and their tenants. They have run a business for many years. Norm was a chiropractor for many years. They ran a very well-respected business out of their home that was I've forgotten what the name of it is. What was the name of the business? USANA, that's right. So, and they were very successful with that. And so they're very competent in running a business. Barb works with all kinds of people. Her kids grew up being homeschooled. They're very competent in their ability to run a small business like an Airbnb. And if people are in your home, you're careful with who stays in your home, So I can't imagine that there would be any question about them running a safe business like an Airbnb, small as it is, out of their home. For me, it's not a big deal. And I live very close by. So I'm not concerned about it at all. If anybody has a question for me.
Any questions, council? Bill?
No, Mayor.
Thank you
Thank-
very much.
Thank you.
The next person is Muriel Apodaca.
Okay, Muriel, if you'll raise your right hand, and state your name, please.
My name is Muriel Apodaca.
And is the testimony you are about to give the truth and the whole truth?
Yes.
Okay, state your name and address for the record, and then you will have 3 minutes.
Okay, my name's Muriel Apodaca. I live at 1134 West Ella. I wasn't at these meetings. Barb and Norm called me. I have a sister who has a son who has 6 Airbnbs. And when my sister cleans them and she needs help, I help them. I'm retired and I have back problems, so I do the things that I don't have to bend over in cleaning of these 6 Airbnbs. I've been doing it for 2.5 years. I didn't care for the concept at first. And in working with them, we have not had a bad experience in 2 years. As far as going in and having parties or anything ruined or anything like that. There's also been lots of children in it. And they're not difficult for us to clean. I've also noticed that the houses that I'm involved with in Albuquerque are nicer because the area that they're in, the people want people to like where they're coming to stay. So they take better care of the property. And that's what I've experienced personally. And I've lived at 1134 West Ella for more than 35 years. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Then the last person would be Bert Cox.
Bert, if you could please raise your right hand, state your name,
Bert Cox.
and is the testimony you are about to give the truth and the whole truth?
Yes, it is.
Okay, then if you could state your name and address for the record, you will
Okay.
have 3 minutes.
My name is Bert Cox. I live at 687 West Ella. So we live not as close as these people. I live about a half mile east of them. I've known Norm for, I think, about 8 years. I do know that they're you're just really good neighbors. And just for example, they always are the people who organize the West Ella Christmas party every year, which is kind of amazing. They keep doing it, and they seem to get everybody to come to these parties. They also, Barbara sends out emails to the whole neighborhood about that usually come from the mayor and from the local police department about, any of the crime in the area. You know, I can't speak, I do know Bell as well. I mean, they are very nice people. In general, I have no worries myself about my property values or going down or crime in the neighborhood. They're the ones who are inviting people into their home. That's up to them. If I was inviting people into my home, I would be very sure to make sure that, these were safe people. So, that's pretty much all I have to say. It's just, for me, it's a complete non-issue, and it doesn't change the way I feel about either of these people. So.
Any questions? Bill, you have any questions?
No, Mayor, thank you.
Bert,
Okay.
thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay.
Mayor,
Oh, yes, go ahead.
I have a couple questions for Mr. Dawson.
Oh, okay.
Is this the
Mr.
appropriate
Dawson?
time? Hi, Mr. Dawson.
Hello.
I'm glad that West Ella has such great neighbors. It's envious, to tell you the truth. Not everybody is in their situation where everybody on the street gets along. But I do have some questions for you.
Sure.
How many businesses do you run out of your home?
Just the one that we already have the business application for, that we've already applied for.
And the name of
We've
that
already
one
been
is?
accepted, and we run that business.
So I thought I read that you have a business called Purple Mulch and Balancing Work and Life. Are those two different businesses?
No. The legal name is Balancing Life and Work LLC, doing business as Purple Mulch. So it's one business, and we're doing business as, the name is just, Balancing Life is just the corporate name, but the Purple Mulch is the doing business as. So the business that we run is Purple Mulch under the corporate name of Balancing Life and Work.
Okay, and when did you start these businesses?
When did I start this business?
At your home, the Purple Mulch LLC, Balancing Life and Work.
We applied for the license about a year or so ago.
Okay, so you knew if you had a business out of your home, you had to have a business permit from the village.
Right.
So why didn't you have one for your short-term rental when you started it?
Oh, that's a good question. What we did is we realized that, there might be some value in renting out the 2 bedrooms. And so we started to paint and get things ready to go before the balloon festival and buy furniture and do all that stuff. Plus, we were renovating an outbuilding in the back of the property for my wife's study room as she's going to graduate school. We got so inundated with painting and moving and construction and getting all that stuff ready for the 2 bedrooms. We lost track of time. It was a week before the balloon festival. I thought, well, we're just going to go ahead and get an Airbnb application in there, Airbnb, get it going, and then we were going to fill out the paperwork afterward. So yes, we made a mistake. We did not file the application in time, but as soon as we got the code violation, I immediately went in there and said, whoops, let's get this thing going. So
Yeah, but you didn't get your code violation right away because the information was being sent to Mr. Jason Lewis, right? So you weren't getting those code violations. And so you hadn't gone out to the village and requested a permit until you were kind of found out about the Airbnb. The next thing I want to know is when you filled out information to set up your Airbnb with VRBO or Airbnb, what address did you give them as your property?
What address did you give as your
I
property?
gave him the address that we live at, 1247 West Ella.
Okay, so do you know how they ever got the 1818 Loma Larga?
I have a theory and I'd like to share that with you.
Sure.
I have an exhibit I'd like to share as well. So I'm going to start with this piece of paper here. I talked to,
Hold on a
Hold
second.
on just
Wait,
a minute.
wait,
We
wait,
need a motion
Yes.
to accept your,
Yes, we have to accept that.
oh yeah,
I move we accept his information.
Do we have a second?
Can I know the nature of it?
He's going to tell you why he thinks the two addresses were
It-
crisscrossed.
it does look like it's a map.
Yeah, I'll second. Yeah.
Okay, anybody? Bill, how do you vote?
Aye.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, there you go. Go ahead.
thank you. If you'll notice on this document here, this is a sample. I mean, this is an actual download from Airbnb. So let's suppose that I go into Airbnb and I look for some nice properties. What I'm going to see is pictures of the rooms, pictures of the house, balloons, maybe something like that. And then as I scroll down, there's a very large Google type map, which you see there. Now you see on the right-hand side, you see a plus and minus. Do you see that?
Yep.
Council Knight? Okay. So what happens is when somebody goes into the map at the bottom of the site on the Airbnb website, they see, for example, Corrales. Now, if you want to expand that area to find out where the approximate location is, it will start to expand and grow and get bigger and bigger. And it'll start to narrow down into the smaller spots in that area. So you can see on this map here, it has a street, a couple of streets in there, and a bunch of silhouettes. And there in the middle of it, in the middle of that picture, there is an icon of a house. You see that? Okay,
Yes.
now what happened, in my estimation, is that Mr. Lewis or somebody gave Mr. Lewis a copy of the map that was it's in the packet. I didn't bring a copy of that because it's in the packet. But in the packet, it has a map that has drawings on it. Somebody drew Dawson Residence, Airbnb, showing the rental location at 1818 Loma Larga. Now, who put that on there? I don't know. Also, there's another map in the packet as well that has artifacts added to it. There's a circle in red. It says, there's an arrow that says improper map marketing. But at the bottom of it, it says the exact location provided after booking. So my guess is, there's a lot of guessing going on in this whole thing, is that my guess is, and I talked to the village people, Melanie and Sky today, and what happens is that these maps are probably given to the person who the code violation went to in no changes at all, except what you see there on that map there. Somebody added 1818 Loma Larga. Somebody drew a circle. Somebody put an arrow. Somebody put the word improper map marketing. Somebody put Dawson advertisement. We don't advertise. We don't make up maps. We don't add anything to these kind of maps. This information comes directly from Airbnb. Who put that address on there? I have no clue.
Okay.
I'm clueless. I don't know.
Okay, thank you. When you found out that people looking to rent the Airbnb were going over to 1818 Loma Larga, what did you do?
I didn't even know about it until the hearing. I was asked by one of the counselors, well, what does 1818 Loma Larga got to do with your address? And I said, I am clueless. And they said, well, this chart here says that it's 1818 Loma Larga. I said, I don't know anything about that. So there's nothing that I could do about it because I didn't know anything about it until the hearing. That answer your question?
Yes, but I know we found out about your Airbnb through some software that the village has. And they identified it as not having a permit and that, you know, the code enforcement person needed to go talk to you. I don't know how Mr. Lewis's address got in here. But I think that's an issue. I don't know if it's with the software or because, you know, one person was having a business that he didn't have a license for, and another person was getting people calling up and saying, oh, your place looks great. I can't wait to go rent there. Probably, you know, I would think that they would say that. So, you know, I think there's a lot of mistakes going on, but they need to be cleared up and not happen again.
We agree, and it's concerning,
Mhm.
but it's really not relevant to the approval of the short-term rental. It's more related to something around the approval of the short-term rental. We're not gonna
Yeah.
come up with an answer tonight, but we are investigating.
Okay,
Does it,
and I just wanted to say too, you know, the council here didn't have any rules on short-term rentals 10 years ago because nobody did them. So as we learned more about Airbnbs, we put those into ordinances and we tweak them every once in a while. So we make sure that
Yeah.
they're appropriate. So I wanted to make sure everybody knew that, you know, we're kind of going off of something that an ordinance we never had. And then now that we have it, we are tweaking it as we go to make it more workable in our village. So thank you.
yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Mr. Dawson, the exhibit you gave us, this is not relevant to your properties that you were, or to your property or 1818 Loma Larga. Well, only because I see different names on streets. I see streets that probably are not even identified according to the Google Maps. But what you just said is in a theory of your explanation of why you think it showed up on Airbnb the way it did for 1818 Loma Larga. Is that correct?
No,
Is this example that you gave us correct?
that's, but there's no address on there.
It doesn't matter, but there's a Lonesome Dove Street and you talk about Camino de la Tierra. That is not Loma Larga. That is not West Ella. I'm just curious about the streets that are on this map. Is it relevant to your property?
This is a sample of the map that somebody would pull up if they were looking for a property. That's not mine, but it's a sample of somebody else looking
Okay,
for a different
so-
property. as
So
well.
this is not properties adjacent to you or Mr. Lewis or Ms. Marquez?
No, it's just a sample of what
Just an
somebody. would see.
example and your theory of what happened.
Right.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Obviously, gun laws being what they are, you would probably tell your applicants or your whoever's coming into the Airbnb, no guns, et cetera, because you have to abide by the laws of the state. Is that correct?
Sure.
Okay. What happens though if you go on vacation? Who do you continue to rent Airbnb? I mean, your property as an Airbnb, or do you close it down?
I would close it down. I wouldn't let people be there without me being present.
Okay. I think for our purposes also, and this is just a comment, we have had in the village, what we call bed and breakfast, residences. And one of the things in our, definitions is that B&B, a bed and breakfast is a short-term rental, basically. So in my opinion, it seems like that's what you're doing is you're running it as a bed and breakfast, not as as a short-term rental. Is that a fair assumption?
I'm looking at what you said there.
Oh,
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Oh,
the
okay.
question. Say it again.
Our
they don't
definition-
serve breakfast.
I'm sorry?
They don't serve breakfast. You don't,
No, but
You
they
don't
We
are,
don't
serve-
serve breakfast. No.
no, but they are resident on the premises.
yes,
Similar to a bed and breakfast. Is
some.
Some. Well, it sounds like they are there 100% of the time. I mean, basically when.
No. I mean, I think some bed and breakfasts don't always have an on-site person. They're supposed to. My understanding here in the village, they're supposed to.
Yes, that's according to our
But
definition.
I don't know that they have them everywhere.
Well, I'm just saying is, Mr. Dawson operating his short-term rental as a form of a bed and breakfast.
No, I'm not operating as a bed and breakfast. People, I have description in my site on the Airbnb site. It says you can come in and you have access to the property, and when you are there, you sleep there, and then when you leave, and you come back and you get a key to go in and out. But that's it.
Okay.
Now, some people may have access to the refrigerator to put something in there for cold or whatever, but we don't serve food.
Well, let me ask you this, with Mrs. Marquez and Mr. Lewis, I noticed, at least looking at Google Maps, that there's a fence over on, I think, the east side of your property. Does it run the full length of the property?
You asked me if there's a fence that runs the full length of the property?
Yes,
Adjacent to Mr. Lewis's?
or Mr. Marquez, well, either property.
Yeah, there's a fence that goes, she put up a coyote fence that goes up all the way down from north to south on our property. And then Mr. Lewis has, before he moved in, the previous neighbors put up a block wall. So the entire property is enclosed.
Okay, so there is no issue of nuances with, I mean, nuisances with your dog barking or anything like that between the properties then?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question.
Okay, I'm sorry, I apologize too, because my wife had made it clear that I don't speak well.
Okay.
So anyway, bear with me. So your dog is not a nuisance to Ms. Marquez or Mr. Lewis?
You know, that's a really hard question to answer. Mr. Lewis has 3 dogs, and we've heard those dogs barking as much as or more than my dogs. So are his dogs a nuisance? Is my dog a nuisance? When those coyotes come into the yard, is it a nuisance? I want my dog to bark. That's why dogs are there. So
Yes.
the subjective answer to a nuisance is no, it's not a nuisance, in my opinion.
Yeah,
So-
I know it's Corrals.
So
Yeah.
let me say this. That's really not relevant to what we're supposed to be dealing with.
Well, according. to
Also,
well,
dogs bark.
yes, I know that.
That's their job.
Mayor, but according to the letter that was posted, nuisance was an issue, I think, in one of the concerns. So I'm just wanting to
Okay.
clarify.
All right.
So I think I got my answer.
Okay.
Okay, I'm good.
Okay. Thank you, sir. You can sit down. Mr. Lewis, your turn.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Lewis, give me 1 second to reset the timer.
No problem.
Now you were at the,
No,
You were
sir, I
not-
was not,
okay. Well, we would ask you to please swear your testimony
of course.
and wait for the launch.
All right.
Okay, Mr. Lewis, please raise your right hand, state your name,
Jason Lewis?
and the testimony you're about to give is the truth and the whole truth.
Yes,
Okay, please state your name and address for the record.
Sure,
You will have
my-
15 minutes.
sure. My name is Jason Lewis and I live at 1818 Loma Larga. I want to address 2 kind of broad concerns this evening. The first
And
has.
can you
to
make sure
do-
you're speaking into the microphone?
Sure.
You can carry it with you if you want.
Well, hopefully I won't be walking around too
Well,
much, but
sometimes
you know,
it helps to
I
have,
appreciate
you
that. I really wanted to cover 2 kind of broad concerns. The first is what I believe to be an inadequate or insufficient, deficient applications by the permit application by the Dawsons. And then the second thing I want to talk about is this idea of a creation of a nuisance. With regard to the first issue about their application being deficient, I want to first refer to the letter from Ms. Stout, where she indicates that an applicant is free to set up their business however they want. And I think that that's accurate. I think they absolutely can do that. But what the village has done is they've instituted ordinances that create essentially 2 categories. You have an owner and then you have an operator. In this particular instance, the Dawsons have indicated on their application that they personally, in their personal capacities, are operating as both the owner and the operator. So my question is, what documentation have they provided in terms of their tax licensing, their lodger's permit, all of the stuff that the village requires? What they've done is they've kind of put this patchwork of documentation together where they've pulled some of their personal information, they've pulled some from the LLC, they've pulled some from the Purple Mulch, but the LLC and the Purple Mulch have not applied to be a short-term rental operator or owner. Only the Dawsons have done that. So it would really be akin to them providing my LLC documentation to support their application, because their LLC has as much privity to the operation of the short-term rental than their LLC does. There's nothing here to show that, and in the event that the village needed to take enforcement action, who are they going to take it against? Certainly they could take it against the Dawsons, because they are the folks who have applied for the permit application, but there's nothing that's been required to this point that says that the LLC is going to abide by all of the rules and regulations that have been set up by the village, and for good reason. So I do believe that the Planning and Zoning Commission really glossed over this issue of whether the application is complete and that it's accurate and that it conforms with the ordinances that have been set forth in the village. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer them. My bigger concern, though, is in the creation of the nuisance that has really been a problem for me. Back in October of 2024, I received a notice in the mail from the village. It was called a courtesy notice at that time. And it said, "We believe, based on observation and investigation, that you are conducting an illegal short-term rental out of your home." And I looked at it and I thought, well, this is ridiculous. I have no idea why I would be being accused of operating an illegal short-term rental. But because it was a courtesy notice, I thought, well, they'll figure it out. Somebody will get to the bottom of it. About a month later, I received an actual notice of violation. And so at that point, I thought, well, this is something I'm going to need to look into. I'm going to have to start figuring out what's going on here. So I first pulled up the ordinance and I saw that the penalty for running an illegal short-term rental in this village is 90 days in jail. So I became very concerned why I was being threatened with being jailed for something that I hadn't done. So I started digging into what could be the possible basis for this. It was at that time that I pulled up Airbnb and I started looking to see if there were any, what I really thought had happened is that somebody had actually pulled, like real estate listing photos or something like that of my home and were trying to run a scam. I thought they were trying to actually list my home on Airbnb and then swindle people out of money. But what I instead found was the Dawsons had put up an Airbnb, and I want to be very clear that this map came directly from their advertisement. This map that I've included, I believe it's page 54 of your packet. And you can see down at the bottom, Norm's pictures there. So this came straight out of their advertisement. And you can see, and I also want to be clear, I did add the circles and the arrows with the addresses because without that information, you're really not able to see my house versus the Dawson's house. So I just wanted to be clear with those markings, whose home was whose. But when you look on that map, what you see is that they have placed that home location, the icon of a home, over my house. And so what occurred was the village's software, when they cull these Airbnb websites to determine if there are any short-term rentals in the area, one of the data sets that they pull from is this map. And so they pulled I think it's called Granus. I'm not sure about that, the software that the village uses. They pulled this data and they decided that it was my house. And so they sent me these notices claiming that I was running this illegal short-term rental. And so I thought, well, let me start digging into that a little bit. So I filed an IPRA request and I wanted to know what sort of photographs or notes or video evidence had been taken by this code inspector, because she says in her note that this violation was based on her observation and investigation. Well, there was none. There was none. It turns out that what happened is the code enforcement officer just rubber stamped what the software told her. She didn't do any independent investigation to confirm this before she sent me these notices of violations. So in terms of a nuisance, this has been a huge nuisance to me. And it hasn't stopped. After the P and Z committee hearing, I thought, well, now that they know, they claim they didn't know anything about this prior to the hearing. So I thought, well, after the hearing, this will be remedied. So about a week and a half after the P and Z committee hearing, I was in a Zoom hearing at my home, and the call button from my front gate was just ringing, 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 ringing. And I thought, first I thought it was a delivery, but after about 6 attempts, I thought, well, maybe there's an emergency, maybe it's the police. So I paused my meeting, figured out what was going on. What it is there are businesses in town that offer management of short-term rentals. And because they use apparently similar software to what the village does, they've thought that my home was a short-term rental, and they wanted to give me this sales pitch about why I should sign up to have them manage my short-term rental for me. And I had two of those people. The one I think was legitimate. The other person showed up and I got the sense that they were actually just checking to see if somebody was home or not. But they did indicate that they were there because of Airbnb. So at this point, I was pretty shocked and disappointed that even after my concerns had been brought out in front of the P and Z committee, that they turned their ad back on and they still had my house marked on the map. It continues to cause me a nuisance. And I want to be clear, when the Dawsons filed their application for their permit request, they indicated and initialed a document from the village that says operation of short-term rental should not create nuisances detectable from adjacent properties. So I really don't know how much more of a nuisance they can create than, number one, getting me threatened with being thrown in jail, and then number two, having these solicitors come to my house because they can't figure out how to fix their advertisement on Airbnb. So for those reasons, I'm requesting that you deny their application.
Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. So after the original P and Z meeting, when the Dawsons were given their okay to start their business or continue their business, you were still getting people come to your house.
Yes. Sorry, go ahead.
No, they didn't switch it over right away, like the next day say, oh my God, this is wrong, we have to fix it. They
No.
were still going, people were still going to your house.
What my understanding, and please feel free to correct me, is that once they were detected as having been illegally operating the short-term rental, they disabled their ad. And when the permit was approved by the P and Z committee, they turned it back on and made no changes to it. So it was essentially the same ad with the same map that had created the initial problems to begin with.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Got a question for Mr. Dawson, if you didn't mind.
Go right ahead.
Mr. Dawson?
No, here.
No, you need to be at the microphone, please, because. So when you submit your application to Airbnb, you gave them which address?
I gave them my address, 1247 West Ella. Why would I give somebody else's address? I'm trying to get money into
I
my
understand.
place.
I'm just trying to get that on the record because it seems to me that it's more of Airbnb's mistake to have put to put Mr. Lewis's address on the map. You do not have any involvement at all with the map when you submit your application. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And let me add to that, to your question, that is the day after the P and Z hearing on February 19th, there were two people that prospected me and said, hey, can we rent? And Ms. Marquez or Mr. Lewis knew about that because they complained that right away I started accepting the application. But what I did as soon as I got a call from the village, Ms. Stout, he said, hey, you have to stop accepting application. I disabled the site like February 20th and 21st. It is non-existent anymore because they didn't want me to, they suggested that I not have any more business.
All right, the next question is, did you contact Airbnb about the mistake of the address on the map?
I did.
When?
Right after the P and Z hearing, I said, hey, what's going on here? Why is this happening? Why are you putting somebody else's address on the map? And they said, we don't do that.
Well, who
All it
does?
is a Google map. It's just a two-dimensional map with
Yes,
an
but-
icon in the middle of it.
The icon has to be put in the area somewhere by somebody. And I have to presume that, and I'm just making an assumption here because I don't have an idea. The Airbnb is the one that puts the icon on the map when you look and search on their website.
That's correct.
All right, did they tell you or give you an idea of when that correction might be made or did they even admit to the error?
They said that icon is standard operating procedure and it could appear anywhere in the map as long as it's within the center of the general area that people are looking at. So that icon can move if you expand or contract that area on the computer. And they said, we are not going to change that.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Mr. Dawson, if they're not going to change it, when you put your Airbnb up again, is it going to go to 1818 Loma Larga?
I didn't put it up again. I took it off.
I know, but depending on this meeting, you'll either get to put it on again or and you just said it's going to be the same thing. So,
I categorically deny that is happening. I have yet to see the actual advertisement. As a matter of fact, this document here that we are referring to, it has a really dark line that goes, a really light line that goes from the bottom of the exact location provided after booking. Somebody put Exhibit C, Dawson advertisement. Somebody put this down here. But Airbnb has said they were not going to put on somebody else's address for my property. It doesn't make sense. It's not a business decision that makes sense.
I agree with that.
So when I put the site back on the property, I'm going to investigate and make sure that there's no illusion to somebody else's address on my siting for Airbnb. So I will do whatever I can to make sure it doesn't happen, but I've yet to see my advertisement be on there for somebody else's address. I do not see that.
Thank you.
I'm sorry for being so insistent on that, but I have yet to see this as something coming from my site on Airbnb.
Thank you, Mr. Dawson. Mr. Lewis, you had some time left.
Yes. I just want to be very clear, when he says that he doesn't know where this is coming from, it is literally coming from his Airbnb ad. You can see his photograph here where it shows him as a co-host. In my initial application, or excuse me, in my initial objection that went to the P and Z committee, I think I also even included some photos from the ad that they've included. This is his ad. He has control of it. And this again goes to the fact that both Ms. Marcus and I don't believe that they have the ability to run this short-term rental in a way that doesn't create a nuisance for their neighbors. If he cannot figure out how to get, I mean, this is a simple thing to do. If he can't figure out how to get my house unmarked from his ad, that's a very basic function of running a short-term rental.
Mayor, this is Councilor Murray.
Yes, sir.
So Mr. Lewis, when you're looking at the map, have you gone to, is it from the Airbnb website?
Yes, it is.
So technically, Mr. Dawson does not have control over that ad. It is coming from the Airbnb ad that is placed on the website.
No,
Now,
that,
if Mr. Dawson has placed his address correctly, they should, the Airbnb folks should have put it in the correct spot. But apparently it seems to me that they didn't.
no, and that's not entirely correct.
How so?
Because Airbnb, when you go into the settings, it specifically says if the icon marking your home is incorrect, you can make adjustments to it. You don't even have to speak to anybody. It's something that's done on the website.
Do you have an account with Airbnb?
I don't.
How can you know that the settings allow for corrections of the map?
Because when they still had their ad active, I looked at it and I tried to figure out how I could fix it. And I wasn't able to fix it because I don't have an account. But there are links on there in their FAQs that say, if this map is inaccurate, here's what you have to do to fix it.
So then it's Airbnb's mistake then, apparently.
I don't know. And frankly, it doesn't matter to me. Because the operation of this Airbnb, if they can't fix it, if it's beyond their control and it's beyond Airbnb's control, it affects me and it affects my property.
I understand that. I totally agree with that too. But I think it seems to me that it's Airbnb's mistake because it is their software. It is their business. When he submits his application, it's up to them to put the correct markings on the map, on the website. I mean, that's my assumption because I've worked with software before and it's never 100%.
Yeah.
There are bugs anywhere in that.
Sure.
And I understand your irritation too. And I totally agree. Nobody should be coming to your house and nobody should be issuing you citations because of noncompliance, because you're not doing something you're not doing.
Right.
I totally agree with that.
But here's the thing. Ultimately, the person who is trying to run the short-term rental has to do it in a way that doesn't create a nuisance for their neighbors. If there's some reason, because it's Airbnb's fault that he can't correct it, then he can't run the short-term rental.
Well, anyway, I'm not sure I agree totally with what your comments said, but I think that, yes, there has to be a solution somewhere.
Okay, John.
Mayor, thank you. Mr. Lewis, just to be clear, the map that's on page 54 of our packet that you referred to, can you please describe which elements you added to the map?
Sure. The red circle and the notation Dawson residence.
Mhm.
The red arrow
Mhm.
that points to the house icon that says improper map marking. And then my address, 1818 Loma Larga.
Okay. Right.
And of course, this exhibit C that he couldn't figure out where that came from. I added that on there.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
So your property is adjacent.
Yes.
Okay. And-
Yeah, we've got.
And how far are your houses apart?
So my piece of property is kind of long and narrow, and I have probably 13 or so neighboring lots on my property. At the front of my property, there's a long driveway. Mr. Dawson's home is right at the very beginning at the top of the driveway. And then Miss Marcus is next to that. And then my home is kind of down
Okay,
here.
so you guys aren't right next to each other?
No, we're
Yeah.
not.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Oh, Stuart?
This is for Lori, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, Lori. Of course, Lori doesn't mind.
So Lori, is it correct to say that the applicant filled out all the paperwork correctly?
Yes.
And if, in terms of enforcement, it would be against Mr. and Mrs. Dawson and not the entities, the business entities or so forth?
Yes. I could give you another example. Even for home occupations, there'll be the applicants are the human beings, I guess, are the applicants. They might have a business name. that goes on their business license. But if there were a court citation, for instance, it would be to those human beings directly.
Okay, and also when they submit their business license, what other issues with lodger's tax? Is there a connection? I mean, how does the lodger's tax get inserted into this process?
So what happens when someone's short-term rental is approved is their next step is to get a fire inspection. And they take the fire inspection approval to Sky typically, and get a business license at that time. And she'll talk to them about the procedure for lodger's tax from that point forward.
So, all right, then for Mr. Dawson, do you have a lodger's tax? Is that a permit or is that a license or?
Well, it's the short-term rental permit is what spurs all of this, but now that's on hold because of the appeal.
Okay, so they haven't been issued a lodger's tax.
If I may, so they have to get their business license first. They have not been issued a business license for the short-term rental yet. That is on hold while this appeal is going through. Once they get issued that business license, Sky sits down with them, goes through the whole lodger's tax process. There is not a separate permit for lodger's tax, but we notate in our system that they are a short-term rental. And then if they aren't reporting, Sky does reach out to them as with a, gentle reminder, hey, we need your reports. They have to send in a report once a month, whether they have, she has monthly contact. So if they haven't had any rentals, they have to submit a report with all zeros saying, I didn't rent this month. And then if they rent it, then they show us what they rented and how much tax they collected, and they pay that to the
So
village.
basically the lodger's tax issue is a non-issue.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Question for our visiting attorney,
Corey.
if I might. Corey, nice to see you again. So our code requires a New Mexico gross receipts tax number for the operator. Those are the words it uses. So on the, and as was just noted on the application, the name of the operator is listed as Norman and Barbara Dawson. The tax ID number is under Balancing Life and Work LLC. So it's an LLC. So and I just looked up, if you look on the Secretary of State's website, you can see that Balancing Life and Work LLC has as its organizer and incorporator Barbara Dawson. So is that sufficient to connect that tax ID number to the operator, human Dawson?
So I'll opine without maybe necessarily getting to
Please.
specifics. So one of the things, and this is kind of a symptom of the application and perhaps lack of familiarity with what we're asking for in this, because the ordinance is pretty clear, right? You have the property owner, and then you typically what you would have is the operator in the event that the property owner is not on site. And so I think this is kind of a unique circumstance where the property owner is operating as the operator, and then they also happen to be doing the business as this LLC or in this case as Purple Mulch. So the short answer is yes, that's sufficient. And the reason why is because really all we would be doing is a ministerial correction to say, yes, Norman and Barbara are in fact the property owners, and the name of the operator, we could go back and insert the name of the LLC, Balancing Life and Work LLC, DBA Purple Mulch as the operator. The functional difference is none. I mean, we could request that, we could make that change again as ministerial, because at the end of the day, the application has named the relevant parties, the property owners, which is going to be Norman Barbara, and then the relevant business entity, which is the one that's carrying that tax number, that tax ID, and then of course the relevant permit for doing business generally within the village. So all of the appropriate entities have been named, which is going to be Norman Barbara as the property owners in the legal sense, and then also the LLC, which is the one that carries the ability to do business. So they've been named appropriately. Is there a small deficiency insofar as they didn't name the operator as the LLC? Arguably, sure. Is that something that's going to be a meaningful impact on the application? I don't think so.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Lewis, do you have any more you wanted to add?
No.
Oh, hey, well, thank you for your presentation. So are we ready? Bill, did you have any other comments or
No,
questions?
I did not, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll close the hearing and we'll deliberate. Do you want to do that in closed session or open session?
Closed.
All those in favor, okay, well, you want
I'll
to make a
second that.
motion to do it
I'll
in
second
closed?
that.
Huh?
Is that a motion?
Yeah,
Council?
I motion we have a closed session.
Okay,
I'll second that.
okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
No,
Bill, what do you say?
Aye.
Okay, we'll go into closed session.
Fair enough.
Okay, the meeting
According
recording.
to, you don't have the statute on here, so I can't,
Oh,
NMSU,
NMSA.
MSA, not MSU.
Oh. Yeah, I know it's
Not a
the
Lobos
Open
man.
Meetings Act.
No,
yeah, see our past
Yes.
council meeting.
But we will stop the recording. Counselor Waldman, I will call you from my cell phone so that you can be in on the deliberation because we're going to have to turn off the microphones.
yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you.
To come out,
Move that we move out of closed session.
Second.
okay, so we have a motion according to New Mexico State statutes, 10-15-1 H, parentheses H. I thought there was a 3 in there. So. Okay. To come out of closed session. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Very good. We're out. Okay. Do you have any comments that any of you want to make? Okay. Well, I'll make a comment. So what we have learned here is that we need to recommend to planning and zoning that preliminary concerns need to be addressed before a final vote is taken. Now, I don't know how those are done, whether you want to set it up to be done written or done there at the meeting, because sometimes people can't make the meeting. And perhaps you can have some recommendations for us. Yes, ma'am.
So it's a quasi judicial proceeding. On the notice signs, it says deadline for written comments is this day, this time. Please email to either Jarrett or I. Those are placed in the Planning and Zoning Commissioner packets with the rest of the materials. They're also placed online. Also during the meeting itself, for every application, the chair will ask if there's anyone present in the room or on Zoom who wishes to comment on this application. So I'm not sure what additionally we need to do.
Mayor, or I mean, may I?
Wait a second. Did you want to say something?
Sure. And just from the planning and zoning perspective, my thought would be that perhaps one of the things that we could do, especially for those comments that are received after the date that we get the administrator sort of review, right? Because what'll happen is we'll get this application, administrator will review, and then we'll recommend approval or denial based on the application. I think sort of the heartburn here is that there were comments that were received after that and that recommendation. And so those weren't necessarily sort of addressed. And so to at least get commission to say, we received those comments and to speak either to them or to say, we received them and, that they've been acknowledged, at least that way that's on the record that, that they've been heard and that they read them.
Okay, I want to clarify. So you would like the planning and zoning commissioners to announce verbally that they have received public comments on the application, not necessarily beyond that. I mean, or what?
Or if they did, right? I mean, in this case, they were extensive comments, just to acknowledge, for the commission to say, we did see them, in advance of the meeting, we did
Okay.
review them, just so that way it's clear that they haven't gone unnoticed.
Okay, I did want to clarify my role because it came up and I did say something to the Planning and Zoning Commission. I'm the staffer. It's my job and my duty to say this application does or does not comply with village code. It's also my duty to pass along any public comments that I receive, both in the public packet and to the commissioners, but not to make an argument pro or con. So I wanted to make that clear.
Yes. No, we're not disputing that at all.
Okay.
But that was a concern of one of the appellants.
Okay.
And so we just thought it'd be worthwhile to reiterate once again that public comments, public concerns should be addressed, because Jerry didn't do it. I don't know that he was very clear. He may have.
Well, again, I wasn't at the meeting, but I know it was extensively discussed during the meeting.
What was discussed?
These points that we're talking about here.
Okay.
No, you weren't at the meeting, no. Not this particular.
I saw the minutes though, and
Yes.
that,
Okay, Mayor, may I?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
So I think the concern is if I were to come before the meeting and make some concerns addressed to the council, I mean, to the commissioners, I want them to respond to that person that they have addressed those things
Okay.
that they've asked. Because if they're ignoring them, they're not doing their job as far as I'm concerned. I mean, they need to do this due diligence and make sure that all the concerns are addressed, whether they're written or verbal.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. And then we are going to discuss this with Granicus to make sure that this type of error doesn't occur in the future. And then Mr. Edwards, we would suggest that you probably talk to your, whoever does your platform, provides you the service.
Dawson.
Dawson, excuse me, Edwards. Where did I get that? Mr. Dawson. We would suggest you talk to the platform or whoever runs the platform that you use for your rental, your short-term rental, and say, look, this has happened and this has been a real problem for us. Can you tell me how to address it? Because I can't figure it out, or something to that effect. Because they'll respond to you, they won't respond to us. The software company that we use will respond to us, but not to you. So if we both work at it, maybe we can get something corrected so this doesn't happen again. So are we ready for a vote?
Need a motion, I think.
Okay, make a motion.
I move that we reject the appeal.
Okay. Do I have a second? Okay, if you reject the appeal, short-term rental is okay. If you approve the appeal, short-term rental goes away, permit goes away. So I need a second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve and a second. How do you vote, Councilor Murray?
Yes.
Councilor Alsabrook?
Yes.
Councilor Knight?
Yes.
Councilor Walman?
Aye.
So passes 4-0. Okay, that's a quorum. So we are finished. Oh, let me direct the, where's the rest of my package? Here we go. Okay, council's now made a decision and our legal counsel is going to prepare findings or one of your partners, I guess. I don't, it'll be you. Okay. Findings and conclusions and decision of the governing body in this document will be prepared and will be distributed to confirm this vote. Will be voted on a date that we will decide. When's the next day we can do this?
Well, we need to give the attorneys time to write up the findings. I don't know if you can have them by Friday morning for next Tuesday's meeting, but I'm thinking probably
That'll be fine.
that'll work.
Okay, so we'll do it April 8th. The April 8th meeting?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I'm going to read this just before we adjourn, just that way everybody's crystal clear. So the matter is stayed while the appeal is pending. So there is going to be the permit for the short-term rental, though approved, won't be finally approved until those findings and decisions. So not until April 8th. So just to be crystal clear, that no business transactions can take place prior to that.
And Corey, do they need to wait for the additional appeal?
Yes, for
timeframe?
the appeal deadline. Thank you. Yes, and then there's an additional 30 days to appeal from that date, just so that the appellants are clear. If you wanted to appeal, that would be 30 days from the day of the decision. The decision is informally today. It'll be formally on the date that the findings and conclusions are issued, which we're proposing to be April 8th.
Now that appeal would have to be at district court.
Yes, that is correct.
All right. Well, then I adjourn this hearing.